going away, which is highly, highly related to this next one I had down, which is people will judge you for whatever you do. People will judge you for whatever you don't do. So people and do the thing.
Right.
It's not going away.
Right. Wait, so this is another interesting way to look at this, is that, again, this fear of judgment if you do something. Well, there's going to be a judgment if you don't do it as well. Like there's a judgment no matter what you do or don't do. So like judgment is just like, I think the trap that people fall into is they assume that judgment is something that you can avoid. Like there's a world where you are not judged by anybody ever for anything. That you find the perfect people who love you perfectly and always agree with everything you do. Like that world does not exist. That's a fantasy land. So judgment is a permanent state of your existence. Whether you are being actively exposed to that judgment or not, like, makes little difference. So you might as well be judged for the things that you find important and worthy. And this ties back into one of the main points of subtle art, or in the first chapter of subtle art, is that like the key to not giving a fuck about adversity is giving a fuck about something more important than adversity. And I think this is ultimately like what holds so many people back in this area, is that they get so caught up on just not experiencing the judgment that they don't think about like what's worth being judged for. What are the things in my life that I don't care how many people judge me for it, I'm still going to do it because it's that important to me. I care that much about it. I think that's actually the question that people should be asking.
Right. And I don't think like this happened for me actually when I came to work for you. I've told you this story before, but I was in the middle of this PhD program. There's a very set path to go. Then you came along and ruined my life and
continue to ruin it today.
Continue to ruin it to this day. No, but there were a number of people around me who basically thought that, hey, you're ruining your life here. What are you doing? Because again, this was 2014. What the hell's a blog and how do you make any money with it? And how's this guy going to pay you? There were a lot of people, the head of the graduate studies, she sat me down and was like, are you okay? What's going on? What happened to you? And to me, though, it was just so, I was like, yes, this was so self-evident to me that, no, this was the right thing to do. So I think you're right. I think you either have to figure out or be in the right space to where you do know exactly what you give a fuck about in this situation, to be able to be like, I don't care what you think. I just didn't care.
It's also realizing, like, I bet a lot of those people who tried to talk to you, it's funny because my wife went through the same thing. Like when my wife decided to leave Brazil and start traveling, like a bunch of her friends sat her down. They're like, because she quit her job, quit her career, all this stuff. So like a bunch of her friends sat her down. They're like, where are you going with this American guy? Like, how does he make money? Like, what's a blog? But it's interesting because I think a lot of those people in those situations, their judgment is actually more about them than it is about you.
100%.
Right? Because it's 100%. Like they're struggling with the PhD program. They are heavily invested mentally and emotionally into it, but also maybe have some doubts, maybe are second guessing themselves, maybe wishing certain sacrifices in their life weren't being made. And then they see you just picking up and leaving, and like, that's scary because it's like, well, if he can do it, what's stopping me?
Right.
What's keeping me here? And it forces them to ask difficult questions about themselves.
Right. That's 100% what I saw. I think.
Yeah.
It was funny though, because there were several people, like my parents, they were like, yeah, go for it. Yeah. That's cool. So, which they've always been like that. So I'm very lucky in that regard, but it was, the peer pressure around it was palpable, but yet at the end of the day, I was just like, I just knew whatever it was. So I don't know, is there a way to get to that? Do you think there's a way to get to that space? Or to me, it just, I didn't even have to think about it at that time. And so I don't know. I think that's maybe harder, where it's hard to find that kind of clarity, I think, for a lot of people.
I mean, I think what you're talking about is conviction.
Yeah.
And conviction's a hard thing to find, but from what I've found true in my life is like there's this great Peter Thiel question where he says, like, every founder, CEO that he talks to that like comes to him for an investment, like the first question he asks him, he says, like, what do you believe is true about the world that most people don't? And I love that question so much, because I think as a creative person, just as a writer, I find that generally leads me to the most interesting topics and the most important topics. But on a personal level, I feel like that that's where conviction comes from, because it's easy to believe in things that everybody else believes in. Like everybody believes a PhD program is valuable, right? So it's easy to believe that, and the fact that you believe it doesn't carry any weight or significance with it. It's very difficult to think that a PhD program maybe doesn't have a lot of value to it. And like, to do that, you have to search for evidence and principles on your own and do the reasoning on your own and become convinced of the reasoning on your own. And I guess that process of like doing it on your own rather than relying on the opinions of others, it is more difficult, but it generates more conviction once it's done successfully.
I gotcha, yeah.
And like what I've found in my career is that I will often investigate things that are very contrarian and like, you know, everybody believes the opposite. Let me look at this thing. And 9 times out of 10, there's nothing there. It's like, okay, well, everybody believes the opposite for a good reason. But that 1 time out of 10, you actually do like, okay, the crowd's missing something here. And if you can like generate enough evidence there, it becomes a very powerful thing.
I had several years to stop and think about it. So it wasn't like this was just, it fell upon me and I was highly convicted. It took a while, but I got to that point. Yeah.
I went through a thing to a lesser extent when I started my online businesses, because all my university friends went into the corporate world. And it was funny because it wasn't as explicit. Like nobody like pulled me aside and was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" But I noticed it's like I kind of stopped getting invited to things. You know, it was like conversations, and like I started getting left out of conversations, or like certain questions that people would ask each other, they stopped asking me. You know, so yeah, you like, it tests you for sure. But it's like I think this is important. Like this comes back to that first point of like, what are you willing to be judged for? I think when you find something that you have high conviction in that is maybe not a popular path or a popular belief, the fact that you get judged for it, like that testing of it, I think is actually important and makes it feel more meaningful. Like I take a lot of pride in the things that I've done because people thought I was kind of crazy when I started. Like that's actually what makes it feel more meaningful and powerful on the other side of it. Whereas I feel like if you're just always following what everybody else says and thinks and does, you're not going to have that feeling of purpose and reward at the end, or not to the same extent.
Definitely. Yeah. 100%. I use it as a badge of honor too.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not, but I think I've always kind of been like that too. And even when I was younger, I was like, I'm not going to be like everybody else around me. And
right.
Yeah.
I guess, but there is a cost to that, right? So it's like,
oh yeah,
you get to feel a little bit more significance and meaning when things turn out well. But when things don't turn out well, you look like an idiot. And also like it's isolating, right? So it's like when you're on the same path with a bunch of other people, you have the added benefit of like a sense of community. You're in a thing together. There are other people who understand what you're going through. When you choose the thing that most people aren't doing, there's a certain amount of isolation that comes with that. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. This was a clip from the Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck podcast. We release podcasts weekly on YouTube and everywhere where you can get podcasts. So be sure to subscribe. Follow us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you like listening to stuff, because we're going to have a lot more stuff to listen to. Check it out.